Hey BookTube, this is Friday Reads on Sunday. I'm Jen and I talk about audiobooks, and I was gone on Friday away from home, had family stuff and a funeral, so thought I would just catch up with you today, which is Sunday, and let you know about the books I read last week and what I'm reading right now. Well, I'm going to start off with Layover. This was an ARC I received from Penguin Random House, and it is by Amy Andelson and Emily Meyer, and it is narrated from 3 points of view by Michael Crouch, Phoebe Strole, and Cassandra Morris. This is a book whose main characters are a guy who's in high school. He's a senior in high school, I think. He's at a boarding school. And a girl who is a junior in high school. She's at school at a high school in New York, in Manhattan, I think. And then their younger sister, who is about 9 years old, I want to say, maybe 8 or 9 years old. And of course, she lives with their parents again in New York. So these three narrators really did a great job with each of these characters. Even the one who did the 9-year-old, she sounded like a 9-year-old, and I was surprised at that. And I'm not sure if that was Cassandra Morris or Phoebe Strole. I've heard Phoebe Strole before, and I'm kind of thinking it wasn't her, but if it was her, she pulled it off really, really well, because I felt like I was listening to a 9-year-old girl speak. So the narration was really good. I wouldn't say that it was, oh my gosh, blew my mind good, but certainly very, very, very good. If I were a teacher and I were going to give it a grade, I'd give it an A-. It was good. Definitely made the audiobook worth listening to. Okay, the book is about these three kids, and they're a blended family. Well, their parents decide to go somewhere in the South Pacific for Christmas, and so the kids follow them, and they get on a plane in New York and they fly to California, to LA, and they have a layover in LA for, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 hours. And they decide, after Poppy spills the beans that she thinks their parents are going to get divorced, they decide, forget it, we're just going to go have an adventure. So they all leave the airport and ditch their phones and decide, yeah, let's just go have an adventure. And so they do for about the next 48 hours. And then, you know, finally somebody gets a hold of their frantic parents, and there's a confrontation kind of that happens, and that, I think, that part of the story is focused towards young adults who probably at times wish that their parents would just listen, and their parents are put in a position in the book where they have to listen. So that part's really good. I didn't really care for the story very much, because I think that the character of Flynn is a young girl who feels like all she does is follow rules. And so with this adventure, she just wants to blow the rules right out the window and do whatever she wants. And she does some things that have some really lasting consequences that I'm sure she was sorry that she did. And so for a person who is a young adult reading this, I think that's a cautionary tale, but at the same time, I don't know that it did a whole lot for the story. Amos, the character of Amos, he was just kind of a grump. He was the older brother who just, you know, no, we're not going to do that because that's so irresponsible. He was that way. And then Poppy was just kind of enjoying everything and going, can we please go to Disneyland? So it was okay. I didn't love it. I thought it was, overall, as a debut, I thought it was kind of, yeah, it's okay. For the right audience, I think it's better than average. But for me, it evened out at about average. So I gave it 3 stars. How to Stop Time is by Matt Haig, and that's narrated by Mark Meadows. Again, another ARC that I got from Penguin Random House Audio, and Mark Meadows made that book. I was so impressed, and I thought, this book, even if I didn't like this story, I would give it at least 3 stars because of the narration. It was that good. It's an adult standalone about a man who doesn't age, and he gets recruited by this organization who protects people like him. And he kind of gets brainwashed by the leader of the organization. And the story frustrated me a lot because this main character knew what was going on but wouldn't do anything about it. And so by the time it got to the end, it was a lot of philosophy about how being afraid holds you back and it can be its own trap. And I thought Matt Haig said it, and then he said it again, and then he said it again. It was just repeating the same kind of idea with different words over and over again. And I thought, finally, I thought, okay, I get it. I get it. If I had, rated it on the story alone, I would have given it maybe 3 stars. But as it was, I gave it 4. And that's a 3.5 rounded up. So I think I'd recommend that if you like adult kind of magical realism, I guess maybe you'd call it, because it's set in a contemporary setting. A lot of it takes place in the 1500s, and it's a whole lot of stuff going on that I just didn't care about. He meets Shakespeare and some other people, Captain Cook, and to be honest, I just didn't care. So, yeah. If you like that kind of stuff, though, you might like this book. So, then I picked up Forever My Girl by Heidi McLaughlin. This is book 1 in the Beaumont series, and it is a rock and roll romance. I've tried to read this about 3 times now. I finally did get through it on the 3rd time. It was re-released in September 2017, I think, pretty sure, with new narrators. Whereas before, I didn't like the narrators, and I don't even know that you can get a copy of the book with those narrators unless it's on audio CD. But the new ones are good. The new ones are Stephanie Rose and Nelson Hobbs, and I really do think that they did the books justice. Stephanie Rose, I didn't love her voice, but I thought she was very appropriate for the character. So when that happens and you're not a fan of the person's voice, you still can enjoy the book because you think, it doesn't matter because that's just how she sounds. So that worked. Nelson Hobbs was also very good. Not my favorite of all time, but certainly good. So the narration was good. And when I read this book the first time, I felt like it was about a guy who ditched his girlfriend because he had to go find himself, and he was just a big baby who was crying all the time about how, nobody understands me. And this time, I felt like this was a guy who blew it and realized it and wanted to make it right and was willing to wait on the people that he needed forgiveness from until they were ready to forgive him. So completely different take on this book. Thankfully so, because I DNF'd it twice because I thought I can't stand this character, but this time it was okay. So I was really surprised. I gave it 3 stars because I think it shouldn't have taken me 3 tries to get through this book, but some books, I guess they just do. I've read other books in this series. Actually, I've read books 2 and 3. I didn't read book 4 because it's basically the same story from the guy's perspective. And I thought, I didn't even like the guy in the first place. Why would I want to read that? So I don't know. I may go back and listen to that if it's Nelson Hobbs or somebody that I like that narrates it. But we'll see. Then I picked up another arc on my iPad, which I read with my eyes. Breaking the Ice, which is an arc that I got from Julie Cross from her publisher. This is book 2 in the Juniper Falls series, and it's about a hockey team, a high school hockey team. And it was pretty good. The main characters were a girl who is like the head of the cheerleading squad, but she's not the ditzy kind of, oh, yay, go team. She wasn't like that. She was a person who was a little bit insecure and trying to overcome that, and very mature in terms of being able to speak her feelings. And the guy is a hockey player. He's a guy that's a senior that has always been on the junior varsity team because he has asthma. And he's also very allergic to things to the point where if he, any little thing can set off an anaphylactic shock reaction. And what I found with this book was that while a lot of times with YA authors, they tend to want to address way too many issues in their books, and it crowds the plot too much. It's like we're trying to deal with too many things here. This didn't happen here. I was really surprised. So it was good. It was a good romance. It had a lot of good, just addressing issues, addressing feelings, kids being honest and having to back up and go, well, wait a minute. And it was a very hate-to-love romance, very slow burn, took a while to get going. So, yeah, I liked it. I gave it 3 stars because I didn't think it was anything that will blow you away, but I thought it was definitely very good for what it is. I listened to Letters to the Lost by Brigid Kemmerer, and this is narrated by Brittany, Pressley, and Kirby Heyborne. Both these narrators were incredibly good. I have to say, while I didn't think that Kirby Heyborne's voice was the perfect one for this particular main character, I thought what he lacked in that matching up pitch to personality, he made up for in spades with emotion and expression. He's just so good. He's just so good. So completely loved his narration. And Brittany Pressley, I've listened to a lot of books that she's narrated, and I think from when I started listening to her narration to now, the books I've read, I don't know, in the probably in the past year and a half or so that she's done, I've seen a real evolution of her growth as a narrator. And I gotta say, she's really good. She's really good. She just keeps getting better. And her voice is perfect for a YA character, a main character. So narration was great. This is the story of a young girl whose mom is a travel photographer. She's like a freelance photographer that has her pictures put on Time magazine's covers. You know, she goes to war zones and does stuff like that. And she dies in a car accident. So this girl writes her letters and puts them on her grave. And then we have a boy who got in trouble and is serving some community service hours. And he does that by maintaining the cemetery with another person whose job it is to do that. So he comes and mows and picks up stuff and, you know, helps maintain it. So this book becomes all about perception and how your perception really does color the way that, not only the way you treat others, but the way others treat you in general. And it's really well illustrated, I have to say, particularly two instances in the book where I found that this was really, it played out really nicely. One was when the boy is talking to the girl and he's referencing a photograph, a famous photograph where it's during the Vietnam War. And actually this is a famous photograph where there is one man and he's executing another man by shooting him. And this kid looks at the picture and he goes, well, who's the bad guy? And I had to catch myself. I thought, oh, wow. It never occurred to me that the bad guy might be the guy shooting the gun. I mean, it's just that whole idea that we make so many assumptions based on perception, and they're not always correct, and that's not fair. I mean, it's basically a judgment call where we are in error a lot of the time. And another time when I think that played out really nicely was when this boy runs into this girl and she knocks into him, he spills his coffee. He's got a cup of coffee, spills it all over him. And there's a teacher that comes out and this guy is not very agreeable. Well, of course, he's just had coffee spilled on him, but he's like, watch where you're going. And she's like, sorry. And this teacher walks out and gives the guy detention, because he's just a kid that everybody assumes is a troublemaker. And he's not at all. This is a great kid, just in a bad situation. Now, this book really bugged me a lot because I felt like this kid was so badly treated by adults and others around him, and he never got a fair shake. Like, nobody was ever willing to look at him and say, well, this isn't fair. And finally, when adults and other people start looking at him and going, are you kidding me? That wasn't your fault. This was the fault of the adults around you. This boy has to be the first one to say, okay, let's make a move towards reconciliation. And the adults never do apologize. And that really bothered me. I thought, on the one hand, it's really good that this boy was shown as a young adult who is making that effort and saying, nothing's going to get solved unless I do something about it. I have to be the one that makes the first move, but he shouldn't have had to be. There are adults in that situation that should have had to be that. And this is a YA novel, so it's good for that reason, but it's also bad for that reason too. It frustrated me a lot. So anyway, I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, but I did round it down to 4. It's a pretty emotional read, one that I'd highly recommend. I think it's a very, very good book. And it's got a beautiful cover too. And the last book I read last week was my reread of A Million Junes. I did this with my two friends, Lisa and Michaela, neither of whom had read it, and I was just hoping against hope, please love this book, please love this book, because I love this book so much. This is by Emily Henry, and on audio it's narrated by Julia Whelan. They both gave it 5 stars. Of course, I gave it 5 stars once again. And for as many times as I say that Julia Whelan is a narrator that I go hot and cold on, boy, this book she knocked out of the park. Oh my gosh, so good, so amazingly good. This is a story about a girl and a boy, and it's got a fair amount of magical realism going on, starting off with a ghost and then some other things about their surroundings, their environment, and reasons why these two people should not have anything to do with each other. And it has to do with a lot of history that gets revealed. But you know what? The dialogue in this is hilarious. I've tabbed up, I have another copy of this, and I tabbed it up just time after time after time that I thought were just the comments were hysterical. The main character in this book, June, she's hilarious. But it's also so poignant, and it's got a lot to do with grief and letting go and forgiveness and all of those things wrapped into this romance between these two kids. And oh my gosh, I was undone once again. I cried. I don't cry at books, but I cried at this book, so 5 stars. I will be rereading this again and again and again, just for that reason. So that was last week, and this week I've read a couple of books, but I will wait till next week to tell you about them. I am currently listening to Exit Pursued by a Bear by E.K. Johnston, and it is narrated by Jorjeana Marie, who is fantastic, and it's about a cheerleading team and a girl who is the captain. And apparently in the synopsis it says that at the camp that they go to every year, it's set in Canada, so they're at this cheerleading camp and somebody drugs her and rapes her, and then she gets pregnant. So it's all about how that plays out, and it just, so far it's really good. I haven't really gotten very far into it. I'm only to the point where she's at the camp and nothing has happened yet, so I think that this is gonna get really intense and really good. So I'm listening to that, and I picked up one of Elizabeth Hunter's books called A Stone-Kissed Sea, and this is all about, well, it's kind of a continuation in her Elemental Legacy series. I think it's an Elemental Legacy series. They're narrated by Dina Perlman, and while I liked the first 4 books on audio, as they went along, I just didn't care for them. So Dina Perlman is a whiz with accents, so she's not a bad narrator. It's just that I just decided I would pick this up on my iPad, so I'm doing that. So reading those 2 things, and then I'll probably pick up a romance, probably a sports romance, because I have just decided to add the romance package, the romance readers package with my Audible subscription, which works a lot like Kindle Unlimited. I decided that because my Hoopla account is so good, I'm just going to drop my Kindle Unlimited subscription and save that money and spend less and add it on to my Audible subscription and be able to listen to all the romance books I want. So I do listen to a lot of romance, so I'll probably pick up one of those. Actually, I did borrow one. It's called Anything But Minor. It's a baseball romance, and so I don't know how that's going to go. We'll see. It may get too steamy for me, but I always just fast forward through the parts that I think I don't need this in my brain. So yeah, you can always do that. So anyway, let me know what you're reading. Let me know how your weekend's going and how your week ahead is looking. And I guess that's it for now from me. So I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.